On August 4th, 2026, three cavers parked on a limestone plateau above Alcanina, an air that smelled of dry thyme and hot stone, listening to the cave breathe cold out of a hole in the ground. Algar do Pena is the deepest single shaft in this part of Portugal. It drops 55 meters in one free hang onto a floor of car-sized blocks, in air that sits at 15 degrees, and the chamber below it is big enough to lose a shout in. Two of them were going down that morning to photograph the lower chamber, with a third staying at the pitch head to work the bags. Their call-out was 9 hours out. What does one big pitch ask of you that a staircase of small ones never does? Everything at once. On small pitches, a drop tool costs you a minute. On a single 55-meter hang, anything you drop is gone for the rest of the day. Rui was 38, a Lisbon caver who had explored this system for 14 years, and he telephoned his sister from the car park before every trip. He went first down every pitch in the club, which is why he was already at the bottom. Tiago was 44, the club's rigger, and he had taught most of the members how to pass a rebelay. What he didn't know that morning was that he was about to be talked out of a plan by the youngest person there. Inez was 31, the newest member, and her habit was the tether. Every trip she clipped every loose item of metal to something before it left her bag, because a shaft is a machine for turning dropped gear into a story. A descender is the only piece of hardware that gets you down a rope. Jammers take you up. Without a descender, a hanging rope is a wall. The plan was small. 55 meters down the main hang, 2 hours photographing the lower chamber, both cavers back up the same rope. Everybody out inside 9 hours. What they didn't know was that the party carried exactly 2 descenders and no spare, because the club's third one had gone home in somebody else's bag in June. They rigged at 9. The first hour ran the way a good club trip runs, rope creaking as it took the load, carabiners clicking at the rebelay, boots knocking grit over the lip, and a voice carrying up from the dark to say the floor was fine. Rui went down clean, unclipped at the bottom, and started setting up lights in the lower chamber. What Tiago did not know was that his own descender was hanging on an unlocked carabiner while he sorted the camera bag at the lip. At 20 past 10, that is when the mountain failed them, because the descender came off the unlocked gate as he lifted the bag and went down the shaft without touching the walls. It hit the block floor 55 meters down and went straight into a slot between 2 boulders. Rui heard it land. He heard it rattle. And then he heard nothing at all. Here is what you need to understand about losing a descender at a pitch head. Nobody is hurt. That is exactly what makes it dangerous. There is no blood and no clock you can see, so the temptation is to improvise fast. And this is where a boring afternoon turns into a rescue. So what does one descender mean for 2 cavers on one rope? It means Rui can climb out on his jammers whenever he likes. It also means Tiago cannot come down to him, and that anything that happens in that chamber now happens to a man on his own. The first minutes were bad. He was stuck down there. The gate was open. The gear was gone. Rui spent 40 minutes with his arm down the slot to the shoulder, and came back up with a cold hand and nothing in it. Tiago said he would come down on a karabiner, on an Italian hitch, which is a real technique and a bad idea on a 55-meter free hang. Inez told him no, and she was the newest person on the trip saying it to the man who taught her to rig. A munter-hitch will lower you, and it will also twist a rope into a spiral and cook the sheath on a hang that long, and the man at the bottom still has to climb that same rope afterwards. She had read the club's own incident book that winter, and she quoted the year and the page number at him while he was still holding the karabiner. Watch the newest caver on the surface talk the rigger out of the clever solution. What they did instead took 3 hours and no heroics at all. Inez drove 40 minutes to the club store, signed out 2 descenders, drove back, and sent one down the shaft in a tackle bag on a separate line. Because this is the arithmetic of a single rope. The cheapest thing in the system is time, and the most expensive thing is a damaged rope with a man underneath it. 55 meters down, Rui did the only thing that was his to do. He put his spare light on, sat on his bag, and stopped moving to stay warm. He waited 3 hours in 15 degrees with his back against a block, listening to the drip and counting it, because counting is what people underground do with a clock they cannot see. Put yourself on that floor for 1 minute of the 3 hours, a shaft of nothing above you, a rope you cannot use, and the certain knowledge that the way out is entirely fine and entirely out of reach. And then add the arithmetic of a man who could have climbed out at any moment and chose to sit still instead. Would you have waited 3 hours or gone up and left your partner the problem? He waited, and he says sitting down was the hardest thing he did that day. The tackle bag came down the second line at 1:30, 3 hours after the descender fell and left him stuck, and Rui had it threaded in under a minute. He climbed the 55 meters on his own jammers, with Tiago counting his rest stops from the lip, and neither of them said much at the top. The club report recorded a descender lost from an unlocked karabiner at a pitchhead, one caver isolated at the bottom of a 55-meter hang for 3 hours, a munter-hitch descent proposed and refused, and a replacement sent down on an independent line. Algar do Pena is still the deepest single shaft in that part of Portugal, 55 meters under the plateau above Alcanena. A shaft is a machine for turning dropped gear into a story, Inez still teaches, and the man who taught her to rig now says it before she does. The report recorded 55 meters, 3 hours, and one unlocked gate, and Rui telephoned his sister from the car park before the next trip. On August 9, 2026, 3 cavers walked into Langun-Gobingob above Calbiga, in air that smelled of wet leaf litter and bat guano, with dripping already louder than the forest behind them. It holds the longest single cave chamber in the Philippines. It is a room you can walk for 10 minutes without reaching a wall, at 26 degrees, on a floor of collapsed limestone the size of houses. 3 of them went in that morning to survey a side series nobody had pushed since 2019, carrying 1 rope between them. Their call-out was 14 hours out. What does 1 rope ask of you that 2 never do? A decision you cannot take back. With 2 ropes, you can always retreat over what you came across. With 1, every meter you rig forward is a meter you have taken away from behind you. Marisol was 32, a Tacloban caver who had surveyed this system for 9 years, and she messaged her mother from the trailhead before every trip. She was the smallest of the 3, and the one they sent across anything narrow. Dante was 47, the expedition leader, and he had led every push into this series since it opened. What he didn't know that morning was that he would spend the afternoon being argued out of his own plan. Kiko was 26, the youngest, and his habit was the retreat count. Every trip he worked out how the party would get back before he agreed to go on, because a cave lets you in far more easily than it lets you out. The side series starts with a 9-meter traverse over a raft, and ends with a 12-meter pitch into the lower level. 20 meters of rope for 21 meters of obstacle. The plan was 1 push and out, 400 meters of walking passage, the 9-meter traverse, 3 survey stations in the lower level, and everybody back inside 14 hours. What they didn't know was that the second rope, the one that made this trip safe, was still in the back of a van in Calbiga, because a bag had been loaded twice and counted once. They went down into the big chamber at 7. The first hours ran the way a good push runs. Boots grinding on breakdown, the tape hissing out and clicking back, carabiners clicking at the traverse bolts, and bats moving somewhere above the lamps. By 11, 4 hours in and on schedule, all 3 were across the traverse and standing at the head of the 12-meter pitch with a rope that was already rigged behind them. What none of them said out loud was the obvious thing. To rig the pitch, somebody had to go back and take the traverse down. At 20 past 11, that is when the mountain failed them, because Dante went back along the traverse, stripped it, and coiled the rope while the other 2 watched from the far side. The rift behind them was now 9 meters of air with nothing across it. They were committed. Not trapped, not yet, but committed, which in a cave is the step immediately before it. Here is what you need to understand about a 1-rope trip. The rope is not equipment. It is the floor. Every time you move it forward, you are removing the floor from behind you, and this is where a survey trip quietly turns into a commitment with no exit. So what does that mean 12 meters above an unsurveyed level? It means the only way home runs back up that pitch and across a rift you can no longer cross. It also means 26 degrees, 14 hours of call-out, and 3 people who now need everything to keep working. Then the rope stuck. It jammed in a crack. Nobody could free it. The pitch was half-rigged. The coil had snagged 40 centimeters into a fissure at the pitch head, wedged by its own weight, with 8 meters of it hanging uselessly down the drop. Dante said they should cut the jammed section out and rig the pitch short, which would have left them 9 meters of rope for a 12-meter drop. Kiko said no, and he said it to the man who had led every trip into that series. 9 meters of rope on a 12-meter pitch means the last 3 meters are a free drop onto breakdown, and a broken ankle down there is a body nobody can lift back up a rope that no longer reaches. He had worked out the retreat before they left the chamber, the way he always did, and he could say exactly how much rope each obstacle needed. Watch the youngest caver in a cave he has been in 3 times overrule the man who found it. What they did instead took 5 hours. They abandoned the lower level entirely, worked the jammed rope free a centimeter at a time with a sling and a karabiner as a lever, and got all 20 meters back. Because this is the arithmetic of a single rope. You do not spend it on the ground you want. You spend it on the ground you have to cross twice. 12 meters above the lower level, Marisol did the only thing that was hers to do. She wrote the survey up to the pitch head and closed the book. They re-rigged the traverse with the recovered rope at 4 in the afternoon and crossed it one at a time with nobody speaking, because everyone knew what the crossing had cost. Put yourself at that pitch head for 1 minute of the 5 hours. A jammed rope, a rift behind you with nothing across it, and a leader who wants to solve it with a knife. And then add the arithmetic of a series you have wanted for 7 years, 12 meters below your boots. Would you have cut the rope and taken the pitch, or gone home with the survey unfinished? They went home, and Marisol says closing the book was the worst part. They came out of the Langun entrance at 9 that night, 14 hours after they went in, with the rope coiled and nobody stuck anywhere. The second rope was still in the van, exactly where the loading list said it was not. The expedition report recorded a bag counted once and loaded twice, a traverse strip to rig a pitch, 20 meters of rope for 21 meters of obstacle, a jammed coil recovered by hand, and a lower level left unsurveyed. Langun-Gobingob still holds the longest cave chamber in the Philippines, 10 minutes of walking under the Kalbiga karst. A cave lets you in far more easily than it lets you out, Kiko still teaches, and the man who found the series now makes him say it before every push. The report recorded 9 meters, 12 meters, and 1 rope. And Marisol messaged her mother from the trailhead before the next trip. On August 13, 2026, 3 cavers walked into Lazareva Pecina above Zlot, in air that came out of the hill cold enough to fog a lamp, with the smell of wet clay on everything they touched. It is the longest cave in eastern Serbia. Behind the show route, the system narrows into 11 kilometers of passage on 3 levels, at 9 degrees, with a crawl called the Keyhole joining the middle level to the far series. 3 of them went in that morning to photograph formations in the far series, 2 hours past the last handrail. Their call-out was 10 hours out. What does a crawl ask of you that a passage never does? Single file. In a passage, a party moves as a group and shares everything it carries. In a crawl, the party becomes a queue, and a queue can be cut in half by 1 rock. Vesna was 36, a boar caver who had explored this system for 12 years, and she telephoned her daughter from the car park before every trip. She always went through the Keyhole first because she was the one who knew what was on the other side. Boyan was 51, the club president, and he had run cave rescue training in this district for 2 decades. What he didn't know that morning was that his own rule was about to be used against him. Nicola was 24, the newest, and his habit was the split kit. Every trip he made sure no single person carried all of anything, because a party that gets separated should not also get disarmed. The Keyhole is 6 meters long and 50 centimeters high, under a roof of bedded limestone that the cave has been shedding 1 slab at a time for as long as anybody has logged it. The plan was ordinary. 2 hours into the Keyhole, 3 hours photographing the far series, and everybody back on the surface inside 10 hours. What they didn't know was that a fortnight of August storms had put more water into the bedding plains above that crawl than the hill had taken in a year. They went down into the middle level at 8. The first hours ran the way a good photo trip runs, boots grinding on clay, oversuits scraping through the tight ground, shutters clicking in the dark, and somebody complaining cheerfully about the weight of the flash bag. At 10:30, 2 hours in and on schedule, Vesna went through the Keyhole first with the camera bag, and the other 2 waited on the near side for her to clear the far end. What she did not know was that the slab above the middle of that crawl had been carrying wet clay for a fortnight, and that it had already moved. At 11 o'clock, that is when the mountain failed them, because the slab came down into the middle of the Keyhole about 90 seconds after her boots left it. It filled 4 of the 6 meters with broken limestone and clay, and the dust came out of both ends at once. Nobody was hurt. Vesna was trapped on the far side. 2 men were on the near side. The crawl between them was gone. Here is what you need to understand about a split party. The emergency is not the rock. The emergency is that half your resources are now on the wrong side of it, and this is where a photo trip becomes 2 separate problems that cannot help each other. So what did that leave her with, alone in the far series? 1 caver, 1 camera bag, 2 lights, no food, and 9 degrees. It also left the 2 men outside with the spare batteries, the survival bags, and the only way to reach the surface. The first hour was bad. She was trapped. The dust hung there. Nobody could dig fast. They could hear each other through the fill, which is worse than silence, because a voice makes you believe the rock is thinner than it is. Boyan started pulling blocks out of the near end, and he had moved a good deal of it before anybody said anything. Nicola told him to stop, and he quoted the man's own training back at him. A bedded roof that has dropped one slab will drop the next one into the hole you just made, and a rescuer buried in a 50-centimeter crawl is a casualty nobody can reach from either side. He had carried the club's own rescue card in his helmet since his first trip, and he read the line about unsupported digging out loud. Watch the newest member stop the district's rescue trainer with the trainer's own card. What they did instead took 7 hours. Nicola went out for the call-out while Boyan stayed at the fill and talked to her through it every 15 minutes, and the rescue team shored the roof with props before they moved a single block. Because this is the arithmetic of a split party. The fast way is a second casualty, and the slow way is the only way that ends with everybody on the same side. On the far side of 4 meters of rock, Vesna did the only thing that was hers to do. She turned one light off and rationed the other. She sat against the wall in the far series with the camera bag under her for insulation, answering Boyan every 15 minutes and counting the gaps between his voice to keep track of a clock she could not see. Put yourself on her side of that fill for 1 minute of the 7 hours. 9 degrees, 1 light you are saving, and a voice through the rock that cannot reach you. And then add the arithmetic of knowing that the people who love you will hear about this before you can tell them yourself. Would you have kept answering every 15 minutes, or saved your voice and your light? She kept answering, and she says the 15 minutes were the only structure she had. The rescue team broke through at 6 that evening, 7 hours after the roof came down and left her trapped, and the first thing through the gap was a hand with a flask in it. She came out through the propped crawl on her own elbows and knees, and she walked the 2 hours to the entrance without stopping once. The club report recorded a bedded slab loosened by a fortnight of storms, 4 meters of a 6-meter crawl filled, a party split with one caver isolated for 7 hours, unsupported digging started and stopped, and a roof propped before a single block was moved. Lazareva Pecina is still the longest cave in eastern Serbia, 11 kilometers on 3 levels under the hill above Zlot. A party that gets separated should not also get disarmed, Nicola still teaches, and the district's rescue trainer now has him teach it. The report recorded 6 meters, 4 meters, and 7 hours, and Vesna telephoned her daughter from the car park before the next trip.